Well, welcome to Jim Wood Speaker Series. Today we have Mr. McCaffrey, who is the Chief Strategy Officer for TBS. The Jim Wood Series was put in place last year to bring leaders and innovators and entrepreneurs to campus so that we can learn from them and their experiences. And we've had a great lineup of speakers, and today is just one such speaker. Let me briefly read his bio. He is the Chief Strategy Officer for TBS, Turner Broadcasting Systems. They've got news, they've got TBS, CNN, all kinds of TV media business. They've been doing extremely well, and he is in charge of looking at the global and national growth. What are some of the risks and opportunities? He leads the executive team in trying to look at where they should go and why they should go there and how they will get there. So, Mr. McCaffrey, thank you so much for agreeing to come down and spend some time with us. And, oh, by the way, before I turn you over to him, please turn off your cell phone. I do that myself. He would love to have questions from you. We learned a lot from your questions. For those of you who have to sign up or swipe your cards, you can do that at the end of the program, not now. All right? Thanks again, sir.
Thank you. And thank you all for inviting me and inviting someone from Turner to come down here and talk to you. We love to talk about our company and ourselves. What I'm going to do today is kind of go through a little fun presentation about media, which some should ring true to you and some should be interesting, hopefully. And then talk about our company a little bit. I hope you know a little about Turner Broadcasting. I suspect one way or the other you watch that which we produce. And then take any questions you have. And I do a lot of stuff with our employees. I have in my organization about over 3,000 people that work for me. They don't all personally work for me. But I'm always willing to answer any question you may have, any questions you may have. So it's interesting, you look at the quote when you think about media. So we're living in exponential times, right? Media has changed everything. Media creates community effects instantaneously. It creates stars, information, both good and bad, flows seamlessly. All of the sort of conventional norms that we think about are changed almost instantaneously. Geographies break down. We're one world. Everything's really changing. And I think you guys hopefully understand that and think about it. One of the lessons and one of the things I hope comes out of this is that, some fail. Media creates some failures, but it also creates huge opportunity for entrepreneurs, smart people, strategically savvy people. And so it really, we're living in exponential times. Of course, I also run technology, but if it wasn't for Tomas, I couldn't make the slide go forward. So who said that? Walter Cronkite said that when he was giving an interview in the first quarter of 1964, and he was talking about the media business, that we are living in exponential times. And why did he say that? Let's look at a quick clip here.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
I can show a lot of video.
2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
So I'm going to come back in a second and talk about television, but what Walter Cronkite was talking about was that plus a weekend in November 1963 that really changed society forever. And people could not believe at the time the effect that a media called television was having on their lives. And it's interesting, some of you are too young, but to me personally, my earliest memories as a child are sitting with my parents in front of a black and white television and watching nonstop television for 4 days in November 1963. And I don't know that that's why I got into the media business, but it certainly had such an effect on me that it's the first thing I remember in life. So one of the lessons that we at Turner try to always remember is that the media technology is always changing. It's always changing our business. And it's the smart entrepreneur, the person who understands that media is always changing, that's able to win and survive and succeed and move ahead. Our company, of course, as I'm going to talk about in a minute, was founded by one of the great media entrepreneurs that ever lived, Ted Turner. And I'm going to talk a little bit about comparing some sort of Turner Broadcasting in Ted's day to Turner Broadcasting today and some of the business lessons and implications of that. But that's one of the things I want you to sort of walk away with, is recognizing that the media business, and some of you came up and you're interested in film or you're interested in media, and I think that's fantastic. But remember, it's not just about now. It's about a continuum and a stream, and while the pace of change may be accelerating or not, the media business is always changing. Now, I don't want to bore you, and I have a speech that will bore you to tears, which is the history of media. I'm not going to bore you with that whole speech, but I want to talk about two interesting things sort of in the contemporary media landscape. First is radio. Because, of course, when radio was first commercially introduced in the 1930s, people said we are living in exponential times. It was changing everything. And another speech I'm not going to do is my disruption speech, but radio was first commercialized as an adaptive technology inside something called a Victrola, which I know none of you, and I don't remember the Victrola. You cranked this thing up, it was like a record player, and it played music, and it was that, by the way, was transformational, and people at the time said we are living in exponential times. Radios were put into the things, and of course, that completely disrupted the Victrola because people went out and started buying radios. They didn't need the Victrola, they bought the little radios. Our first sort of big media disruption in effect. And by late 1930s, you had about 30% penetration of just radios. The Victrola thing had died off, but not before the inventors of radio had bought the Victrola company. Radio Corporation of America commercialized radio. They put the Victrola out of business. The first stupid media deal gets done, followed by many since then, and they buy the Victrola company after they put it out of business. Don't worry, it keeps going. So radio brought a couple of interesting things, though. It brought the concept of programming to media. Nationally distributed, planned programming, which you still see to this day. And very important and near and dear to our heart was national advertising. That advertisers would pay more to reach more. And that was the very first concept that you still see in effect today. Now, unless you think all of this was easy, right? RCA went on after they commercialized the radio and they launched a network to take advantage of advertising. Unless you think all of this was so easy, and I don't know if you guys are sort of studying this, but late in the 1930s, the president of what was called AT&T at the time, and it's had so many iterations, but it was the only phone company, was asked, why doesn't AT&T get into this radio thing? This is like really cool. You could create a network effect. A lot of pressure from analysts and others on AT&T to get into it, so the chief executive of AT&T felt compelled to go public. And he uttered publicly that it was inconceivable to AT&T that people would gather more than 2 to 3 times a year around a radio to listen to events. Maybe they would gather to listen to something like the inauguration of a president, because what could be a better, faster, more effective means of communication than the telephone? So AT&T made the very wise decision not to launch a competitive radio network. So it's not actually as easy as I'm going to make it sound. So radio comes in, humming along. By early 1960s, radio is at 90% penetration. Television is now coming on the scene. 3 months before the Kennedy assassination, the television journalists applied to the National Association of what at the time was called wire, print, and radio journalists for accreditation, and they were turned down. The only legitimate forms of news and accreditation were radio and what were called wire services, which have fundamentally ceased to exist, and print. So radio was it. Television was this nascent media. It didn't work. It was really rough technology. I had a meeting with all of our sort of geniuses at Turner, and these people are really like media geniuses, and challenged them and talked about some of the technologies and what the early TV guys had to overcome. And our people just couldn't believe it, right? You didn't have satellites, you didn't have tape decks, you didn't have anything, yet television was there. And of course, the Kennedy assassination comes along, and creates a media. The world has never been the same. The radio journalists broke the story of Kennedy's assassination. They were the first on the air, but what people today remember, and as history has been, including business history, has been written, was CBS News had a card up in front of a camera. It was a camera that was live on the set of something called As the World Turns. It was live. They stuck a little card up that said special bulletin while Walter Cronkite read, shots fired in Dallas. And people remember that was the breaking event. And one of the things I asked our technology folks was, why didn't they just put the camera, why didn't they just get a camera on Cronkite, right? Of course, he was in a different building, and it would have taken 30 minutes to warm up a camera. So it wasn't for 45 minutes later that what you saw could actually put a live face. And he stayed on the air for 24 hours, which is interesting. Now, television, of course, has gone on and on. That weekend was sort of pivotal and launched television. The world saw the first live murder on television. The world saw the first burial of a president. People were enthralled. They basically consumed television. By the end of the weekend, 90% of the people were sitting in front of their television, sucking this thing up. Television, of course, went on to do fabulous things. The war in Vietnam, to a large degree, was a television war. The sitcom was launched, and Turner Broadcasting, of course, came out of that. Lest we think it was that easy, early in the mid-1960s, well after this event, NBC decided to test something called color television. So they telecast live to 200 sets, first time ever, the Tournament of Roses parade, live and in color. And when Saranoff, who was the president of NBC, was asked to talk about the test, he said, clearly television will never become a means of mass communication or entertainment. So it's not that easy. But of course, it really is about us, right? And it's about you guys, and what I worry about is learning the lessons of the past, but also trying to understand the future, and show you a little piece here about media today. Oh, I can hear it. Welcome to my world. So how did we, Turner Broadcasting, sort of get here as a company? Technology has been the fuel that has driven the company. Ted, at the very beginning, understood the power of taking a network, which at the time, well, actually it was a local television station down in Atlanta, and telecasting it using satellite technology to people at the time that were in rural America getting cable television. And we have always used the change and the shifts of our time to create new opportunities. I'm going to talk about some of those. Let's look back a little bit real fast at three interesting businesses that have driven a lot of the growth for Turner Broadcasting. First is the acquisition of MGM. The company was acquired by Ted with all the money he had in the world. He bought what was fundamentally a film studio, not for the film studio part. He bought it for the content, so he could put the content at the time on the local television station and then provide that station. A week after buying the company, he realized he had completely over-levered and sold back the studio part a week later, but kept the film part. People thought that was insane. Why would you do that? You buy a film studio to make films, not for the libraries. Of course, that has launched to this day, not just TBS, which was the first. The films of the MGM library were the backbone of the launch of TNT. And we went on to then, once those networks had become more contemporary, we launched something called Turner Classic Movies. Someone had asked me once sort of what the return on invested capital would be on this. I actually, not here, but have people at another university trying to actually get to a hard number. My back of the envelope rough thing says it's somewhere around 5,000% return on the initial capital that was put into the MGM library. But again, and it wasn't bought for the production side. CNN. CNN, of course, is a child of the early Kennedy news breaking events that I showed you. CNN, again, married technology in the large and the small ways, distributed itself worldwide from the very beginning. People thought that Ted was completely insane to launch a 24-hour news network. And then CNN came of itself during the first Gulf War when using technology, which was the ability to actually get what was called a live wire, which engineers can explain to you, but new technology, to be able to stay on the air, the only network, the only sort of fools that were willing to do it during the initial United States assault on Baghdad. And CNN was the only place that one could get real-time, instantaneous information about what was happening. Really interesting, and I haven't used this interesting story about CNN. We had a visit last year. We do some things in partnership with the government of the United Kingdom. So Prince Andrew came over to meet with us and thank us for some of this. And we were talking about the second Gulf War. And he said, despite all of the military technology and the communication thing, the place that the leadership in the United Kingdom still goes to for breaking news during the war and afterward was CNN. And I'll talk more about sort of where CNN has come in. Of course, CNN is a mega business of huge scale today. And then Turner Sports is interesting. Again, Turner Sports was launched on the backbone of network distribution, built upon the broadcast model and expanded upon it. Turner Sports, I think, is one of the most profitable, most successful sports businesses today. We have a relationship with the National Basketball Association going back about 28 years, which is by far the longest network league relationship. We did a deal 12 years ago to take over all the digital rights for NASCAR, way before the shift happens today. We saw the potential of using sort of digital technology to distribute sports. And then 3 years ago, we did a deal with the National Basketball Association where we took over all of their digital rights. And so we're continuing to lever Turner Sports using technology in every way you can think of, and we're just now beginning to look at 3D production of games and high-definition production of games in a very exciting way. So that's just three real quick examples of the past. The lesson is that technology cannot be something at Turner that we're scared of. It has to be something that we continue to embrace to drive growth. And I'm going to talk about where the company sort of has gone in the last few years. But some of the interesting things I thought you'd appreciate is, I'm sure you all have iPhones and download apps. There's 50-some-odd thousand apps, including hopefully today a new CNN iPhone app, the first. if our good friends at Apple allow it, because what we want to do is what no one else has done, which is stream live content. And Apple doesn't like that, but I think they'll say okay. It's a bandwidth hog. But so, you know, we got 50,000 apps out there. We have 3 in the top 25, all of which are around Adult Swim. I'm going to assume that almost all of you know what Adult Swim is. Okay, you don't need my, okay, you guys should know what Adult Swim is. If you don't, you should stay up late and watch Adult Swim. You don't know what it is. Do you? No.
I've seen it.
You don't know? You have seen it. The sum of the viewing, the viewing on Adult Swim every night is greater than the sum of everything else on. And you don't even know what it is. But you guys know what it is. So we have 3 Adult Swim apps in the top 25. We can crank these things out. The margins, like 50% on them. We can crank them out. You guys buy them. We make a lot of money on them. We would have 4, but one, and I won't tell you which one was rejected for content reasons, which Apple has the absolute right to do that. But this has been just a fantastic new business that's a lot of fun. The Adult Swim people are kind of kooky crazy anyway, so this has just been a blast. And what we're learning is how to launch more apps. We also do, as I rush through the sports stuff, but we also run the digital rights for the PGA of America and the PGA Tour, and we've launched apps against those. And so, you know, people who work for me are cranking these things out as fast as they can. But CNN Today, it's interesting because CNN Today is like no other news organization, reaches about 2 billion people around the world. We have feeds everywhere you can think of. In the United States, CNN, despite what you may read or may hear from others, CNN is the #1 reaching news network. CNN is the #1 mobile place for news. CNN is the #1 by far web set of digital websites for news. And CNN is a hugely profitable business for Turner. So this is a great business that has been built on the back of technology and change and constantly morphing what it is. And you may have heard about this, but sort of if you haven't, you will. The next sort of thing we're working on is called TV Everywhere. It's getting a lot of press. We were the first. The concept here is if one is, and I hope you all pay for your content. No? Just, so I have this reverse mentor, this like sophomore from Georgia Tech. It's right, you know, you can throw a rock from my Techwood office. And so he comes over like every 2 weeks to show me how to steal stuff. And then we get like armies of engineers and say, okay, this is how he did it. And then we start to figure out sort of how to defeat you people. But anyway, so if, I hope you pay for your content. And if you do, the concept behind TV Everywhere is that if you pay Comcast or Cablevision or DirecTV for your cable, for your feeds of networks, you'll be able to access any Turner show, no matter what it is, anywhere. So you can go to any website, you can go to any computer, you can go to anywhere, and basically if you're a Hawthorne fan or if you're a fan of certain Adult Swim shows, you can get that content anywhere you want, and that protects our cable subscription stream. We also think it'll drive incremental value to the company. So it's a big idea. It's a massive technological challenge because we have to be able to authenticate you as who you are without actually allowing you to take the content and give it to all your friends around the world. So, but TV Everywhere is big. It's getting a lot of press. We have lots and lots of people working on it, and I think, knock on wood, it's going to be exciting. So that's the mission at Turner, is to continue to embrace technically driven change. And I hope the proof is in the pudding. If you look at the company over the last 6 years, so you saw the video, you saw how fast things are changing. The rap is that television networks are dead. People are going to get all their video online, right? That's sort of the rap. If you look at our company over the last 6 years, we've more than doubled revenues and earnings. If Turner Broadcasting, it's the fastest growth period the company's ever had, the last 6 years. When you would think, right, things should be flattening out, things should be tough. We've also increased consumption, viewership. CNN ratings are way up. TBS ratings are way up. We had the best season we ever had with the NBA last year. TNT's ratings are way up. We've had huge success with original programming. Adult Swim didn't even exist 6 years ago. It's now like a slot machine. We pull the handle, money pours out of it as a business. If Turner was, and we're not, we're the largest division of a mega media company called Time Warner. So you can't actually sort out what we are, but I'll tell you that we're the largest division. We're well more than half of Time Warner's earnings. If we were a Fortune 500 company, we'd be in the top 150, both in terms of earnings and in terms of revenue. So the company is a phenomenal success story. We've been able to do this embracing of technology to find opportunity to constantly fuel the engine and grow, grow, grow. That's a whole cultural challenge that's sort of, I can take questions about if you want. But we can't ever lose sight, and sort of being a little vague here is part of my message to you. We don't ever lose sight of our past and the history, and we don't get kooky crazy about the changes of today, because the largest media event, television event in history continues to be something that was a long, long time ago. So 600 million people watched that event. It continues to be the most watched event in history. The technical challenges to bring that from the moon live to 600 million people around the world, they basically had to invent the cameras, they had to invent everything had to be invented new. So we never lose sight of just what sort of the media history means to us. And because you got to have fun with some of this stuff, I have a little video to show you, which we did not do, so no letters or cards or emails or other things, but it's sort of how would television news cover the moon landing today, because the news business has clearly changed.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Let's talk now with our panelists. Juan Williams, your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I'm just thrilled. It's huge.
It's momentous news, really. This is an incredible milestone in the history of this country.
It's incomprehensible. Even a year ago, I wouldn't have thought this possible.
It's a one-of-a-kind historic moment. I'm glad I'm here to witness it. Speechless.
Tom Foreman is monitoring Twitter. Tom, what are you hearing?
Absolutely, Anderson. People have been posting messages relentlessly. Many people saying that they skipped work entirely today or skipped school if they were going to summer school. Some people taking their lunch breaks to watch all this, keep track.
This is man on the moon, not just American man on the moon, although it happens to be our guy. But it's man on the moon.
You know, I think around the world, among the 6 billion people on this planet, I think tomorrow morning, everywhere in the world, in a few hours, in Europe, in Africa, in Cape Town, in Nairobi. This is a huge story. 15-year-old kids right now in Kenya are waking up and reading the paper.
It feels like anything is now possible.
The fact that we've gotten this far is crazy.
We beamed you in. We beamed you in here. How are you excited? You're the first one that we beamed in. It came in peace for all mankind.
The president is coming out. Let's take a look and listen in as he does that.
A man touched down on the moon. The world was connected by our own science and imagination.
So many promises that were unfulfilled. One of the promises that we can proudly say in this nation has to some degree been fulfilled in a very symbolic way tonight. We'll see what the practicalities of it are in the next months to come.
I love it. Man versus moon. So that's sort of my talk. I'd be happy to take any questions you have.
Let me start off. Talked about going in a big way with digital media. Now, your friend from Australia has been talking about charging for digital media. What are your thoughts for TBS? And you said about authentication, but that I think you meant to Comcast and Dish Network and all of that, not to TBS, directly at least.
Right. That's the biggest challenge, probably a strategic challenge facing media today, which is how do you make money? And the line, we throw it out and you hear it all the time, is digital pennies for television dollars. and we have to be very careful that that's not the trade-off we make. And it's interesting when, you know, somebody does this talk to you, not you guys hopefully, but another group in 10 or 20 years from now, I think this will get worked out, but the revenue model in digital media is incredibly uncertain. There isn't one. We've tried a bunch of different things. We launched a subscription game service called GameTap that failed. We launched a comedy site that was a subscription comedy site that didn't work. We have formed something called the Turner Digital Ad Network, where we aggregate together all of our web businesses. And on a video basis, I think we're number 4 in terms of video delivered. A lot of that's CNN, a lot of that's sports. And we're certainly a top 10 group of web businesses, and we're selling that together with our television business. So the working theory is the huge reach of television, which is still massive, combined with the ability to target on the web businesses creates more value. And the old rap on the web was that you just had unlimited inventory, therefore pricing was very low. So one of the things by bringing everything together for us is we would never control pricing, but we can control inventory, just how much there is. To some degree, then supply and demand kicks in. So we're cautiously optimistic that it's by combining the reach of television with the addressability of digital. But it's really uncertain how one is going to make money. TV everywhere, though, is a big step forward if we can figure it out. Good question. What else?
Do you think that TBS will ever become a separate business again from Time Warner?
I hope. No. I don't know. So it's funny. It's like Back to the Future. When 1995, Time Warner bought Turner. Turner at the time, and it's a whole complicated scheme how it got done, but Turner was about 3% of Time Warner's earnings. So now we fast forward to this year where Turner's going to be about 60% of Time Warner's earnings. Right? And we are the only division growing, and we're continuing to grow this year. We've had, again, to double in the last 5 years, you guys can do the math, but it's just below 20% average annual growth rate on the top and bottom line, and we're going to grow again this year despite all the economic woes. The other divisions of Time Warner are not doing as well as we are, so that ratio is going to only tighten. And it's funny, it's like, yeah, it's Back to the Future. And I talked to some of the old Turner people, and I'm like, it's all about Turner now. It's hard. Right now we're lumped, I don't know if you care about this, we're lumped in with HBO, which is really small. And I think the pressure on Time Warner next year to break out Turner will be huge amongst investors and analysts. And so they'll start to be much more, it'll make my job really interesting, but there'll be a much more clarity. But Time Warner's a puzzle. I don't know, figuring it out. It's half my job is figuring out where Time Warner's going. So I think you're certainly going to see much more focus on Turner, as you should. If you want to buy Time Warner stock, which is how you invest in the company, you want to know how Turner's done. Yeah.
What was the logic behind Ted selling the company?
It's a whole nother lecture, but Ted, as a lot of entrepreneurs, had constantly over-levered himself. I talked a little bit about the MGM deal, but he kind of got himself through the MGM deal and then got the idea to launch CNN, took everything he had and launched CNN, put it right on the line. Remember, CNN didn't really come of being, it was launched in 1980, didn't really come, wasn't viable until the first Gulf War in 1990. So Ted, again, like a lot of entrepreneurs, was somewhat undercapitalized. And so he did a deal with the 5 largest cable companies who invested in the company, took board seats, and also had a huge amount of control over how money could be spent. And that, again, Ted is like a lot of entrepreneurs, drove him nuts. Couldn't spend, this is a guy that had always taken everything he has, put it on the table, and was able to do it. Now he wasn't able to do that anymore. And he was very frustrated. And so Time Warner, Jerry Levin, who was running Time Warner at the time, used to run HBO, and was the one that engineered the acquisition of the company. And it had been a public company before that, but he couldn't spend money. And so it really was about access to capital. I mean, you guys know this, and it allowed Time Warner, the sale to Time Warner allowed access to capital. The cultural changes were huge that the company went through. I came in right then, right at that, basically in front of that acquisition. And it was culturally really tough managing through that period. But the best thing Time Warner has ever done from just a returns basis was by Turner Broadcasting. Bar the billions and billions and billions of dollars that Time Warner has spent since then, nothing has generated a return close to the investment in Turner Broadcasting, not even close.
Okay, so the Liberty Media aspect of it was what drove them.
Well, it was Liberty, there were 5 cable companies.
I'm aware of it.
Yeah.
I didn't understand the behind the scenes because of the fact that he had always landed on his feet. Because I remember when he did MGM, a lot of people questioned it, but he wasn't interested in the studio because he wanted the content of the studio.
Yeah, and again, I don't know a lot of I mean, I know sort of the semi-public stuff, and we certainly know the public history. What he really always wanted, Ted, was a broadcast network. Because I worked with him a couple times on it. He wanted to own a broadcast network. His strategic vision was that the marriage of a broadcast network to cable networks, that there was a single value stream, money flowed through broadcast and programming, down to cable networks, that was going to be the successful model of the future. He wasn't wrong. He couldn't get anyone to give him the capital. And I don't know if there were certain commitments made or he thought by selling out to Time Warner if he'd be able to do that. So he was capital constrained before that to do. When the company was public, he couldn't spend more than $2 million without the approval, $2 million, without the approval of the shareholders, which were the cable companies. So that was, I suspect that was a little of the behind the scenes. Yeah?
I have a question. Why is it that TV shows that are already made, why do y'all keep repeating shows, just change it up a little?
You don't think we change it up?
Well, because like ER and Hacker, they're very similar to each other.
Oh, you mean as far as the creative? Well, I don't do creative, but when something works, right? Imitation flows like crazy. I mean, there's like 12 nursing shows now. That's what happens when something is successful. Audiences are fickle, and you sort of chase whatever the idea is. We have had pretty good success at TBS and TNT with original programming. Knock on wood. Adult Swim has had great success, but some of the best programming on Adult Swim, like Family Guy, didn't start on Adult Swim. And so it's not just the shows, it's also the environment you create that you put the shows on. People love the Adult Swim environment. When you go there, you're going to get what you're going to go. We did a major, again, another talk, we did a major branding exercise about 6 years ago on TBS and TNT. One went one way, one went the other, which was not something Ted ever wanted. He used to call them T1 and T2. Take the programming and mix it all together and just run it. It's a bigger audience. And we said, no, it's a consumer packaged good. You got to have a brand. And we started to differentiate. So dramas and original dramas went to TNT, comedies and sitcoms and both original and off-net went to TBS. But that's just follow the leader. I mean, hopefully we're the leader, but sometimes we're the follower. You kill shows really fast, except in rare circumstances, and we've been usually the rare circumstances. We launched, the normal, if you know television, you buy 11 episodes. You go to Hollywood, you say, I want 11 episodes. You pray that the 11 get an audience. Then you renew for a second year, 11 more, and that's sort of the cycle. If you can get to 44 or 4 years, then you can put them into syndication or reruns, and that's been the traditional model. We went to now he's famous, but he wasn't so famous 3 years ago, but he was successful, a guy named Tyler Perry. He said, will you do a show for us on TBS? We have a very significant African-American audience. Our guy said, we got to do something here. So we did a 100-episode commitment. It's like $200 million. And we said to Tyler Perry, you're hot enough, we're willing to lay down for 100 episodes sight unseen. So it's not, and that was a first. That was a show called House of Pain. Now we've done a second one. Tyler Perry's gone on to fame and fortune. He's here in Atlanta. But we've always been willing to take big risks on not just the technical side, the technology side, but on the programming side. That was a big, big risk. Because if it didn't work, we were hung for 100 episodes. Yeah?
What are some of the ideas to get people to watch the TV everywhere? I mean, there's so many sites that give these shows, they might not be legal, but without commercials, without interruptions. What's the incentive? Or what are the ideas to get people to be interested?
Little carrot and stick. Hulu and YouTube will not make the shows available. They'll pull them down. And we have a process in place with YouTube. Right? They're part of a big company. They want to be legitimate. They don't want to violate intellectual property rights. So they'll pull shows down. We tell them it's all automated, and they yank them down as soon as it happens. If you really want to work at it, you can still work really hard, and you can get a show, and you can share it. And that's a niche, very small segment of the population. But the incentive is you get the show you want, where you want it, when you want it, in its original form, and it's legal. You don't have to pay any more for it. If you're a cable subscriber or satellite subscriber, you get it wherever you want. Movies are a little tougher. And again, we don't do long-form feature movies. Our sister company, Warner Brothers, does. And they're doing everything they can to try and prevent the piracy of movies. And it's not you stealing a movie and sharing it with your friends. There's institutional piracy overseas that is really tough to combat. But there's things that are being done on the movie side. It's a much bigger problem for Warner Brothers. The commercial skipping thing is interesting. We were originally worried terribly about DVRs, TiVo, replay 7, 8 years ago. Behaviorally, and we track this stuff like you wouldn't believe, behaviorally, early adapters skipped commercials and then they stopped. As these boxes and this technology rolled out, as you change one set-top box, they just give you DVR capability with like a zillion hours. People just don't skip the commercials. So we have not had any real negative effect. Our measurement, this may be too technical, the way in which we measure is called the Nielsen meter. Used to be you just watch the show and that was your measurement. Now it's the viewing of a show plus the next 3 days. So even if you delay the show and you watch it within 3 days, Nielsen's going to go to 7 days. So we still get credit. So net, we're indifferent. What I worry about, and I don't know if you guys know the answer, what I worry about is TV Everywhere, which will have commercials, might incent people to go back and start use their DVRs to skip the commercials. That, you know, it's always the behavior you didn't anticipate. So we've got research people trying to test that hypothesis. But I don't know. I don't know. There's something about just sitting there watching shows, which is fascinating. And people, it's just amazing. So commercial skip so far has not been a factor, despite proliferation of DVRs. But it's a good question. It's one of those things that just rattles in my head that we're watching really carefully. Yeah?
Technology often seems outrageous when it's first emerging. How do you differentiate between something that's genius and something that's just a wacko idea that you don't know?
Well, it's hard. We try, and I think that's more of a cultural question than a technology question, and I sort of get to do both. I think we try really hard to allow our employees and the culture to take risks and be innovative. To the best of my knowledge, we've never fired anybody for making a mistake. We reward the I have an idea person. It's the biggest small company you ever saw. And so we really try and encourage the risk taker and the innovator. Some ideas are crazy and nutty. Now, we're not great at it. Adult Swim, it was some nut, right? And he's still around, right? He's like, you know, I mean, he had been a cartoon forever, not a young guy. And he was like, you people are insane. Nobody's watching Cartoon Network after the little kiddies go to bed. Do something with the overnight time. He had this idea to run adult animation because we're like, you know, the big dumb company. We're like, all right, that may be a good idea, but maybe not. So we'll give you one night a week. He was like, you know, kill me. So we did one night a week. We got huge ratings, and we did what a lot of big dumb companies do. We did what? We said, all right, now you can have 2 nights a week. And it probably took a year and a half for us to find our way to go all the way. And what we never will do is mess around with the creative side or the journalistic side. You know, they pretty much can go, and what you see is sort of what it is. We never interfere from a business matter with the creative, and that's been to a large degree our success. But we let it go. And I mean, trust me, I've had some really big misfires. But you keep going and you keep trying, and as the company gets bigger and has more scale, the ability to take risks should improve economically. We watch our returns like a hawk the whole game, right? You guys are learning this. The whole game is return on invested capital. So we try and get people to at least justify the $1 million that some good is gonna come of it. But we don't squander money. But we want the place to continue to be innovative and a bunch of entrepreneurs. Yeah.
What area do you see yourself expanding in as far as employment is concerned? Are you just in the need for engineers and technical people, or do you need your basic accountants and marketing?
Well, the company, again, has doubled in 5 years. The employee base has doubled more or less in 5 years. I believe we also watch productivity measurements, not classic factory productivity measurement. So I certainly hope we're more efficient than we were. Our margins have grown year to year to year also, which is terrific. But we've grown everywhere. So every area of the company has grown. You know, in my particular areas, and I have a big sort of area of responsibility, certainly we have an almost insatiable demand. I was talking to some people before this for people who understand IT and broadcast engineering. It's really tough sometimes to get really good people. And it's this nexus of IT and broadcast technology that's changing everything. It's not just broadcast engineers anymore, and it's not just CNN engineers in the field, people that understand that nexus. But on the creative side, you know, hopefully people with good ideas can always find a home at Turner Broadcasting. And the support areas are, again, we're very fortunate that we're continuing to experience good, strong growth. We didn't have to do, you know, headcount reductions this year or layoffs or any of that kind of stuff. So it's kind of neat. Yeah.
One question. How do you deal with artists who feel that the downloading and the piracy is actually a opportunity for them, and they're starting to take a bigger role in creating their own future with it versus joining in or letting you license?
Well, sometimes they're creating a future that has no economic benefit to themselves. And if they want to do that, anybody can post anything to the web. You can go to YouTube and put it up. But the cats swinging from fans do not generate a lot of dollars nor eyeballs. Traditional content is still the biggest moneymaker. And if you look at television, because I get this question in a different form a lot, which is about, you know, digital download and digital distribution is going to kill television. So first we got to look at television. The average consumption of television per week is about 40 hours per household in the United States, 40. The average consumption of online video is about 15 minutes a week. So one is teeny, tiny, 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 and one is huge. Television consumption is still growing. It's not going down despite what people think. I get maybe newspaper readership is going down and that national readership of national magazines is going down. Television consumption is still growing. The last 3 years have been the fastest growth of television consumption in the United States. So this is not, and if you think about sectors, it's not a sector that's really distressed. The economics continue to be phenomenal in television. So from the economics come the money that often allow artists, you know, to exercise. They need to get the shows on. That said, we've watched and we continue to watch what happened in the music industry, which to a large degree was about form factor. Really, really carefully so that it doesn't happen to us. And so I'm not naive enough to say that 20 years from now, people are still going to be watching networks. But I certainly think network brands and network identification and the network distribution of content will continue to play an important role. Our trick is we got to make sure we're in the other areas without going broke getting there, which I think was what your question's about. I mean, again, you got to be willing to take some risk. Yeah.
Outside of CNN, how much actual production is Turner?
Television production?
Yes.
A ton.
Yeah. So many different things you watch in shows that are purchased, whether it be your sitcoms or whatever. I was curious with the other part.
Well, we have at Techwood Drive in Midtown, 600,000 square foot Turner Studios, which is part of my area of responsibility. And that's the largest production center in the United States, east of the Mississippi. We have a separate studio called Cartoon Network Studios in Los Angeles. We have Turner Original Productions that make a lot of the original shows you see on TNT and TBS, also in Hollywood. And then Warner Brothers, of course, is the world's largest studio. They're our sister company that makes a lot of the stuff, but not exclusively that we put on our air. You want, again, the creative process has to be about tension and the best stuff gets on the air. So we make a lot of our own stuff. That said, we also, the game is really not necessarily about leveraging your production capabilities. If you have an advantage, use it. But it's about getting the rights you need, particularly for digital distribution. And so as we go to Warner Brothers or other studios, we always try and get now those digital rights, use our leverage there. But it's a big, and CNN is a mega production center. We have 3 other production centers, one in Buenos Aires, one in Hong Kong, and one in London that produce for our international networks. Anything else? Yeah.
What was some of the process of you getting in connected with TBS? Did you first start off as a chief strategist?
No. It's like who you know. I mean, this is another talk, but I was a consultant, and I had a bunch of clients in Atlanta, including Coca-Cola. And if I'm sure a lot of you go into consulting, right? But at some point, I've been doing it for 6 years. At some point, you need a real job. And so I knew the guy that was running at the time was called the Turner Entertainment Group. And the company was so different in 1995. It was like the whole earnings of the place were maybe $200 million. Now it's around $3 billion. So it was this tiny little company. But I knew the guy running the entertainment group, and I was sort of hustling him for work. And he was like, you know, maybe you need a real job. Why don't you do the same thing but come work here? And I was like, all right, I could try that, because I sort of wanted a real job. And so, yeah, I got like a cube and a phone and started in the literally in the basement. And then it's a lot about luck. This is a different talk, but then, of course, Time Warner comes along. I got to work on that. There were some schemes afoot to change the structure of the company that Ted didn't like, but I won't go into that. But I was working on that, and Ted went on to become vice chairman through this process. His longtime lieutenant, a guy named Terry McGurk, who now runs the Braves, took over, and Terry needed a place, right, to hang out. He didn't know. He was like living at CNN Center. He had to go over to Techwood, and there was an empty office next to my cube. And it was like luck of the draw. He plops down in this empty office, comes in one day and says, ah, you know, we haven't met. I'm going to be moving in next door. And I was like, you know, if you need help, just, you know, I'm here. And we got the big buds, right? Every day it's proximity. And he was like, you know, let's look at this, let's look at that. And that was sort of it. And, you know, it's a lot about luck, and hopefully, you know, I've been able to add something to the company. Yeah.
I know we have to stop, but let me ask you one question about your job. Now, we saw the pace of change is tremendous, especially in your world. And TBS has done a lot of things right for your company, for the corporation. How do you get, and you're growing large, you're doubling, how do you get people, I mean, to me, the chief strategy officer ought to keep the people thinking, imagining, give them enough leeway to think outside the box, but don't get a lot of people falling off the cliff just because you're cuckoo crazy, you know? How do you keep that going in a large corporation? And
the bigger the organization, the harder that is. Yeah. It's a huge cultural challenge, which is you want to encourage entrepreneurship. And in our case, though, we don't want people who are television programmers or create content to think, well, I'm not important anymore. We really stress communication. We're constantly, I mean, as poor Tomas knows, I spend, you know, at least a day a week meeting with big groups of employees and talking the Turner story. We over-communicate. I think we have a very engaged, supportive employee base. We do a lot of like testing and surveying. And the one number that always sticks in my head is 95% of the people that work at Turner would recommend it as a place to a friend to come to work. And that always says to me, that means, you know what, there's something that we bend over backwards on. When you get benefits at Turner, you don't get anywhere else on the planet. And I think through this economic recession, it was, to a large degree, the employees knew we were the last thing we would do as a company was let people go, the last thing. And I think the people then are willing to do a little bit more, but it's a real challenge. And I've personally, because I have this weird job, which I run all the operations, but I also run strategy, and that's semi-intentional, which is we know technology to a large degree is going to change the way we do business. We wanted a connection there. But I've made a lot of goofs along the way and gone way too far on the innovation side or gone way too way on the core television side. So it's a balance. It's really hard, but it's a balance, yeah. And you kind of learn it as you go.
Yeah, but the other side of it is you're in charge of the operation. So you could be so much focused on what you're doing and miss the big ship just passing by. And so, but anyway, congratulations for a great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please join us.